All right, today we are continuing on with the 1950s and the civil rights movement. So, I would far prefer having this lesson done in class because, to be honest, by eighth grade, I know a lot of you guys are very familiar with different things that went on in the civil rights time period, the people, the events, and so um, I'm trying to change it up a little bit today because, like I just said, having seen what my kids learn from K to 8, a lot of the stuff you guys touch upon. So I don't want to be too repetitive on things that you've learned before, but I also don't want you to miss any of the really crucial moments that make the civil rights movement what it is. So just follow along and hopefully I can cover everything for you. So the first thing that of course needs to be mentioned is the I Have a Dream speech. Now I'm not going to play, ooh, he disappeared. I'm not going to play, there he is, the video for you right here, but I'm going to include the link. If you haven't seen it before, please watch it. You don't have to watch it in its entirety. And I'm also going to include the transcript for you. If you want to choose one over the other, if you can do this, I would prefer you watch the video and maybe have the transcript up. It really, as you all know, whether you realize it or not, you've heard quotes from it. This is a truly defined historical moment. So if you haven't had the privilege of listening to it, reading the words, I'm going to really implore that you guys do that today. I'll leave you to do that on your own. And what I'm going to do is just throw some fun facts at you for it. So I'm sure you've seen images of it. It was huge. There were 250,000 plus people at this march. Very interestingly, I did not know this, and I just realized I missed a quotation here. But it was actually called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms. Not that that changes anything about it, but like it wasn't. I mean, obviously, this had to do with civil rights, but it wasn't technically like, the Civil Rights March or the Martin Luther King March, which is kind of how we think of it now. I know we've touched upon Malcolm X earlier in the year, too. He's kind of like, I don't know, the counterpart maybe to Martin Luther King. They were both fighting for the same thing, but Malcolm X, I don't want to say had a more negative reputation, but he kind of sort of did. Whereas Martin Luther King was known for advocating for the races to come together through peace. Malcolm X was kind of okay if force was necessary. So I think that's the most politically correct way that I can define the two there. Martin Luther King's speech actually almost never happened. I don't know if you've ever seen Forrest Gump, and I think it's rated R, so only under parental supervision, although it is on regular TV from time to time. But in Martin Luther King, they actually do a little spoof on this when Forrest Gump goes to make his speech. They unplug it so nobody can hear him. So a similar thing actually did happen at the real march that it is symbolizing in that movie. And the sound system went down before his speech, but of course, thank goodness they got it up and running again, and he was able to give that I Have a Dream speech. Martin Luther King also he was an important person at the time, but there were a lot of other important people who were also speaking at this march, and Martin Luther King kind of got the bad time slot. He was like the last one to go, and nobody wanted that slot because they figured, oh, all the media is going to leave by then, most of the crowds are going to die down, and sure enough, Martin Luther King's like the last to go, and it ends up being the moment in history that it was. And then my one last thing, which I think is one of the coolest facts about this whole moment, is that the I Have a Dream section that we label the speech after almost never happened. In fact, he yells out to the crowd, or actually, I'm sorry, one of his friends was out in the crowd, and while he's giving his speech, somebody yells to him, Martin, tell him about your dream, tell him about your dream, based on a conversation they had had earlier on. And kind of off the cuff, Martin Luther King goes on with his I Have a Dream and goes on with that whole portion of the speech, which just really kind of almost makes it more special to me to know that that's how it happened. So what you guys are going to do now is I left for you a whole list of notes. It's kind of like the civil rights movement in a nutshell, and it kind of covers, sorry, I walked up the stairs holding the computer, and now I'm like out of breath. That's so pathetic. I need to work out. Anyway, it's kind of in a nutshell the major aspects of the civil rights movement. So, like I said in the beginning, I want you guys to just skim through this. A lot of this stuff you probably already know. I know my own children have read books about this, and this. If you've encountered it before and you already know the information, great, move on. If you haven't, then all of this stuff I really do want you to look over, keep for your notes and study. There will certainly be a couple of things on the final regarding this, so just keep it for your notes. But just for your knowledge as a human being in this country, these are all things you definitely should be aware of. So look over the list. Obviously, the list is here in front of you for the final, so you don't need to memorize anything, but definitely have a familiarity with all of the stuff on the list. One thing I did want to point out, the Rosa Parks story, which all of you guys know Rosa Parks. I know you've mentioned her earlier in the year. That story is also a little more fabricated as far as history is concerned. Rosa Parks didn't just spontaneously decide to just give up and refuse to give up her seat that day. This whole moment in history was kind of sort of planned out. She was already good friends with Martin Luther King. They kind of already knew what the effects of it was going to be. I'm telling you this not because I'm trying to diminish her place in history as a woman in particular, and a woman of color especially. What she did, oh my gosh, I'm gonna run up the stairs again, dogs are barking. What she did in history should never be forgotten, and it did start a huge part of the movement with the boycotts on all of the transportation systems. I do just want to point out, though, that it was kind of sort of planned. So, again, not to diminish her importance, but just to give you some truth in the history. Always important. All right, what do we want to do next? Boop, boop, boop. Here we go. So the last thing we are going to do today is, rather than just quizzing you on the actual facts of the civil rights movement, and I'm out of breath again, stop making fun of me, I'm going to have you read this little story. Actually, we're going to start reading it together. And what you guys are going to do is make a prediction at the end of the story, and I'll tell you what actually happens in history tomorrow. So you are going to read an excerpt from a book called Little Things Are Big by Jesus Collin. So I'm going to read the first part with you now, and you guys are going to be in charge of creating the prediction. So in the 1950s, segregation and ideas about race shaped the way Americans in all parts of the nation saw one another, as well as the way they saw themselves. As writer Jesus Collin discovered on a subway ride in New York City, those ideas also influenced the decisions people made about one another. And here he goes. I'm taking a deep breath. I've been thinking, sometimes one thing happens to change your life, how you look at things, how you look at yourself. I remember one particular event. It was when, 1955, 56, a long time ago anyway, I had been working at night. I wrote for the newspaper and, we had deadlines. It was late after midnight on the night before Memorial Day. I had to catch the train back to Brooklyn, the West Side IRT. This lady got onto the subway at 34th and Penn Station, a nice-looking white lady in her early 20s. Somehow, she managed to push herself in with a baby on her right arm and a big suitcase in her left hand. 2 children, a boy and a girl, and 3 and 5-year-olds trailed after her. Anyway, at Nevin Street, I saw her preparing to get off at the next station, Atlantic Avenue. That's where I was getting off too. It was going to be a problem for her to get off. 2 small children, a baby in her arm, a suitcase in her hand, and there I was, also preparing to get off at Atlantic Avenue. I couldn't help but imagine the steep, long concrete stairs going down to the Long Island Railroad and up to the street. Should I offer my help? Should I take care of the girl and the boy, take them by their hands until they reach the end of that steep, long concrete stairs? Courtesy is important to us Puerto Ricans, and here I was, hours past midnight, and the white lady with the baby in her arm, a suitcase, and 2 white children badly needing someone to help her. I remember thinking, I'm a Negro and a Puerto Rican. Suppose I approached this white lady in this deserted subway station late at night. What would she say? What would be the first reaction of this white American woman? Would she say, yes, of course, you may help me? Or would she think I was trying to get too familiar? Or would she think worse? What do I do if she screamed when I went to offer my help? I hesitated, and then. So your job today, guys, is to put yourself in this man's shoes. Again, this is a real person with a real story, with real issues, which, even though this is taking place in the 1950s, are still things you can imagine going on in the streets of, say, New York City today. So your job right now is to make a prediction. What do you think his decision was at the stairs there? Should he help the woman? Should he not? Why wouldn't he help her? Why would he help her? What risks would he take? So here are your 4 options. If you have a different option, feel free to take it. What will he do next? Will he help? Might he help? He probably won't help, or he will not help. Again, anything in between, feel free to choose too. So just write your response here in the box. Write your prediction as to what you think he's going to do. And of course, based on what you read or based on what you know from history or even what you know from people in your life, what do you think he did and why? So I will give you the answer for that tomorrow. With that, don't forget to read over the notes that I'm providing for you, and we'll pick up on this tomorrow.